Some stories begin in silence, in echoes that belong to only one voice. First, we heard Ellie, the one who stayed, who carried absence in every room. Then we heard Mateus, the one who left, lighter, freer, but still turning back. Now their names have been spoken, Ellie, Mateus. Not just voices in the quiet, but people, each holding a different side of what was lost. This part belongs to Mateus, to the one who walked away from weight, but still find absence waiting in the corners of his freedom. The echo between worlds isn't only about endings. It's about what remains after, and how even freedom carries a shadow. This is Echo Between Worlds, Part 6, What the Walls Remembered. 5 echoes, one church that has stood through centuries, one man who is learning that moving forward doesn't mean forgetting. I stopped beneath the towers. They looked heavier than they felt. All stone, all history. But the sky leaned on them, like it trusted they wouldn't break. I thought about how long they've stood here. Centuries of weather, of people who left and never came back. Even silence must echo when it's carried this high. For a moment, I didn't feel small. I felt untethered, like the towers were holding the weight of remembering for me, so I didn't have to. Freedom isn't wings, not really. It's the ground not asking you to explain why you're still walking. It's being able to stand in front of walls this old and not feel their questions pressing into your chest. I didn't think of Ellie at first, not in the carving shaped like ropes, not in the rose window that caught the sun. For once, the silence wasn't pointing me back to him. It was just stone. Stone that had seen everything and didn't need me to add my story. I let myself look up until my neck ached. The sky spilled between the towers, so open it almost felt careless. And I thought, maybe that's all freedom is. Not forgetting, not erasing, just standing under the towers of something that has lasted and realizing the weight is theirs to hold, not mine. Inside, the air shifted, cooler, heavier, as if it had been waiting centuries for someone to notice. The light poured through the glass and fell across the floor, not loud, not commending, just steady, like it had made peace with the stone. I walked the center aisle, not hurried, not looking for anything, just watching the light lean against the columns, like a hand finding a shoulder. For once, I didn't feel out of place. The ceiling stretched too high to touch, but it didn't make me small. It made the silence bigger. And in that space, I could breathe without rushing. I thought about how light doesn't belong to anyone. It falls where it wants, across wood, across stone, across the seat that might have been his. But today was only wood and sunlight. And I wondered if that's what freedom is. Not filling every absence, not explaining every shadow, but letting light fall where it does, without asking it to mean more than it is. I sat for a moment in the sun, let it land on my hands, let it tell me nothing. And for the first time in a while, that was enough. The courtyard was open but not empty. Stone on 4 sides, but the arches made space for the sky to lean in. I sat near the fountain, not because I was tired, but because I wanted to hear water instead of my own thoughts. The carvings wound their way around the arches, ropes, shells, leaves. All these details someone cared enough to shape, even though the centuries had already promised to wear them down. I wondered if they thought about time, or just the quiet joy of tracing stone into something alive. It didn't feel like a place for grief. The silence here wasn't asking for memory, wasn't reminding me of absence. It was just silence, the kind you can lean back into, like sun against your shoulders. I let myself sit without answering to anyone, without holding or naming what wasn't here. I thought of Ellie, briefly, the way absence always tries to pull at the corner of things. But here, even that thought softened, as if the arches caught it and held it still until it faded. The chapel was darker than the nave, stone pressing close, shadows leaning in. I lit a candle, not because I had words, but because sometimes silence needed its own shape. I didn't say his name, not here, not to the walls, not even to myself. The flame didn't need it. It burned without asking, without tying itself to memory. For a moment, I thought about prayer, about how it's supposed to rise, up, out, carried by fire and smoke. But this candle just stayed. It didn't reach, it didn't plead, it only burned, quiet and sure, like it knew the dark was enough. I could have named Ellie. I could have let the flame speak for me. But freedom isn't always saying less. Sometimes it's knowing silence is enough. So I left it. A candle without words, a flame without claim. And for a moment, walking away felt freer than naming anything at all. The café smelled of sugar and cinnamon. I told myself it was just habit. To order the tart, to sit by the window, to watch the sun spill across the plate. It was ordinary, sweet, warm, golden. Something small to remind me that not every silence has to be heavy. I looked up, and through the glass, I saw him. Not clear, not long enough to hold. Just Ellie. His shape caught in the light, passing by as if the street was the only place he ever belonged. My chest froze. The spoon stopped halfway. For a second, the cafe felt quiet, the tart forgotten, the air itself waiting. I pushed the chair back. I ran out the door, heart beating like it still knew his name. The street was already empty, just the river's light, just the sound of gulls, just absence, patient as ever. I stood there, breast caught between freedom and longing, and knew he was gone. Or maybe he'd never been there at all. But the tart would still be waiting inside. The light would still fall across the plate. And I would still walk forward, carrying both the freedom and the echo, like the river carries its tide. Ellie, the one who stayed. Mateus, the one who left. Two names carried through walls of stone, through light that fell without asking, through silence that did not demand an answer. Here in the church, the walls remembered more than they said, and Mateus learned that freedom is not the absence of echoes, but the choice to keep walking, even when they follow. This was the Echo Between Worlds, Part 6, What the Walls Remembered. 5 echoes, one church that has stood through centuries, one man who walked past the walls, toward the river, toward whatever comes next. If this story has stayed with you, please remember to subscribe, share, and leave a review. It helps the echoes find others who might need them too. And if you missed the earlier parts, go back and hear where the echoes began. Until the next part, thank you for listening.
I found your book where the cover bends, the line you